Good afternoon and good to see you all. Today we're going to be discussing an interesting subject that's not widely discussed, but as you know, we're going through our different discussions of different concepts in Judaism, going all over the place with different issues. And today we're going to talk about why, as we gave a little teaser yesterday, why Jews don't accept the Christian Messiah. What is it? Why is it? So at first out, let's first explain that over here, as a Jewish person and as a rabbi, we talk about the greatness of Judaism, and we're not here to defame or discuss any other religions or practices. So I'll take you back in history in July of 1263 to King James of Aragon, who summoned one of the most illustrious, well-known philosophers, rabbis, commentators on Jewish law, by the name of Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. And he summoned him to come and debate the value of Judaism versus Christianity at the time, because as you know, as the Spanish always looked to convert the Jews to Christianity, and therefore they believed that if you hold that Judaism is of value, then come and debate it and explain why it should be against Catholicism at the time. And the person that he had to debate at the time was a fellow by Pablo Christianity. And one of the unique things about this debate was that Nachmanides had an open mic. He was allowed to have the freedom of speech, different and in contrast to any other debates that the Jewish people were put up against, was that they were not allowed to say everything that was on their mind. One of the unique things about this debate is that we know all the details of the debate because Nachmanides actually documented his debate back and forth that he had and what he mentioned and what he said. Unfortunately, because he documented it, the Spanish government at the time, the king, expelled him from Spain because the church felt a backlash because the Nachmanides came out as of course, as the victor. And they felt that we gave you the freedom of speech only during the debate, but nobody gave you permission to write it down. And because of that, he had to leave the land of Spain. He eventually came to the land of Israel, where there he wrote his volumes and commentaries on the Torah, and eventually also passed in Israel, and he is buried in Hebron, right outside the Cave of the Patriarchs. So Nachmanides at the time had a debate. Now, one of the things were that Jewish people in general did not like to debate these issues, simply because it was a lose-lose situation. There was not going to convince any of the Spanish people, as Jewish people were not here to convince anybody to join Judaism. We're happy with everybody practicing their own religion as long as you don't impose on us. And at the same time, we don't even look for converts. And also, being that the Jewish people were going to, even if they, so to speak, win the debate in public opinion, they're going to then be, and many times they were penalized because of it, whether they were expelled, as in the case of Nachmanides, or they were then suffered by the hand of the Inquisition. So there was no real reason for them to debate. However, they were forced into these debates because the Christians and the Catholics at the time wanted to show their superior quality of of their religion, and they felt that if they can debate and, so to speak, put down Judaism, they will have a chance. Now, Nachmanides came to this debate, and at the debate, he addressed the king directly. And one of the first things that he addressed the king by was saying that Christianity lacks rationale. To be able to assume, and in fact, he started this debate because one of the differences about this debate was that they were going to prove from the Torah, so to speak, how you have to believe in Christianity, and from the Talmud, and so on and so forth. The first thing Nachmanides did was an historical perspective. And he said, Jesus, who they believed was the Messiah at the time, was killed in the time of the Second Temple era, at the end of the Second Temple, during the time of Rabbi Akiva, by the hands of the Romans. That means the Mishnah and the Talmud only were made 120 years after the destruction of Second Temple, the Talmud 400 years later. Just from an historical perspective, should Christianity become or be something which is of mainstream Judaism, then how come none of the rabbinic scholars, Talmudic scholars, mention a thing of it, talking about a belief in it? They all died and were born and died as Jews, and none of them accepted Christianity as anything of a value. So just from a historic perspective, Judaism never accepted Jesus as the Messiah or Christianity or Catholicism as of value to be able to adapt it. And Judaism is authentic. It's going back 3,000 years. On another note, Nachmanides takes, and the second step that he addressed to the king, which was just based on a rational perspective, to come along and say that a person who was born from a how he came about, and then he died, and then came back alive, and all that stuff. He says, just logically, that doesn't make sense. How can we build a religion on something which is illogical? Which one may argue then and say, isn't Judaism a lot of laws illogical? This whole week's Torah reading is about laws that are illogical. And this is where Nachmanides stressed to them very clearly. That if you're going to come to me to believe Christianity based on faith, I have no premise to accept that faith over Jewish faith. If I'm basing it on faith, Judaism is based on faith. And based on faith, we have to believe and accept what God is. Now, if you're going to tell me accept the base is super rational, that's why I believe in Judaism, because it's super rational, then it's not an issue for debate. If you want to look at it from a rational perspective, Christianity has no rationale either. There's no rationale to making sense to anything to believe that he was the Messiah, or is, whatever you want to call it. So from a rational perspective, you can't believe it. If you're coming to it from a faith-based perspective, we have Judaism that we believe in by faith, and there's no reason to negate it. That was number one. The second thing, which was now an irrational way he looked at it, and he said, if you believe in Christianity to believe that Jesus is the Messiah because whatever Messiah is meant to be doing, if we look at what the prophets tell us that what Messiah is meant to do, Messiah means bringing the world of peace, no killing, no war, and everything else of that nature. And he says, you, the church at the time, was responsible for the most killing ever. There were the most wars going on. So none of the benchmarks, so to speak, that the prophets talk about of what Messiah and the era of Messiah is supposed to be ever happened. So how can we believe in it? So Nachmanides tackled this from two perspectives. And he said the very fact why Jews don't believe in Christianity is number one, because it's not rational. And if it's faith-based, we have our faith that we believe in Judaism, which pre-existed before Christianity, and there's nowhere that should say that we should believe in or something else. Number two, if you want to say from a rational perspective, none of the benchmarks of what Messiah is supposed to be, as it's mentioned in the prophets, has he ever done. So these are the two ways, and these are the two simplistic approaches that we say that we take, and why we reject as the Jewish people the concepts of Christianity believing in Jesus as their Messiah. This is, of course, a very summarized idea, and there's a lot to be talking about it, but if anybody has any further questions, we can always discuss this at a later time. But the concept over here is I just wanted to, as we're going through different issues, and especially as we talk about belief in God and why as we as Jewish people believe in what we do and reject the notion of Christianity to Catholicism, that is the basic premise. Now let's jump to something completely on another line, which is we talk about over here, one of the customs that many people know is, in fact, we at Lubavitch East End send out a candle for people who are observing a yahrzeit. There's a very well-known practice. If you go into any supermarket, Jewish or non, you walk in the kosher aisle together with the Mrs. Adler's gefilte fish and the Kedem grape juice and the Manischewitz matzo ball mix, you will find yahrzeit candles. What are yahrzeit candles? They have them in tin ones, glass ones, 24-hour candles that are lit. Why do we light a yahrzeit candle? What is a yahrzeit candle, and when is it lit? The prevalent custom is that when a person celebrates or commemorates, I should say, the annual day of passing of a loved one, they light a candle in their memory. Why do we light a candle? Where does it come from? The Talmud brings it, and the Jewish law brings it when it comes Yom Kippur. We light a candle, and the reason why we light a candle is let the candle atone for the sin of those who are representing as a candle. Meaning that in Jewish law, we know that a candle is considered the light of the soul. A candle is symbolic of the soul. And therefore, when we kindle the candle, we are asking for atonement, for forgiveness for this soul, so it should be able to climb its heights as it goes on high. That's number one. That's the simplistic term. So we find it on Yom Kippur that we light this candle. The same thing is also we light a candle the day of passing is asking for an atonement for the soul for whatever may have done in this world. Now, why do we light the candle? If the soul is on high, which takes us to the next step. As you recall in the Yizkor prayer, we also mention in the Yizkor prayer, we mentioned the concepts of and the teachings of the mentioning and remembering the person as they go on high. And what do we do in their stead? We do a mitzvah and we give charity in their memory and in their honor. Why is it? Because being that a soul on high cannot do a physical mitzvah, because it's absolute spiritual, what we do in this world affects the soul on high. So, for example, on the day of a yahrzeit, we study Mishnayos, we give charity, we say Kaddish, we do different mitzvahs that we do in memory and in honor of that soul because they can't do it on their own. The same idea as lighting a candle. We light a candle to atone for that soul, but also to remember that soul as the candle is symbolic of a soul. As it says in Proverbs, Kiner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the candle of God is the soul of the human being. And when we light the candle, we then remember the soul that's on high, and we therefore dedicate that day's actions, that day's mitzvahs, in the honor, in the memory of that individual, because when we do, the relatives, the friends and family of that departed soul does something in this world in memory of that soul, it automatically gives an elevation to that soul, and it shines back down, reciprocates that great elevation that it gets to its family and friends on this world. May God bless us, that every soul should have an elevation, and every soul should be able to shine down on the souls of the people here in this world, be a good blessing and good omen for them, that we should only celebrate happy occasions, wonderful occasions, with wonderful times together. Thank you for tuning in to today's Lunch Break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m. God bless you and all the best.